The council chamber of Orion's spire was immense, its walls glowing with soft light and its floor polished to a mirror shine. Delegates from dozens of alien species moved in a slow, formal rhythm, their shapes and colors strange to human eyes. Some had scales, others feathers, and a few had no visible faces at all. Every step echoed through the hall, a reminder of the weight of decisions made here. Humans had been called to the council rarely, but their presence always shifted the balance. Daniel Hayes, a tall man with dark hair, moved steadily through the chamber. His eyes were calm, almost unreadable, as he glanced at the delegates around him. Behind him walked Clara Mitchell, smaller but equally poised, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The two humans walked without speaking, yet their quiet confidence drew attention. The council president, a being called Zorath from the Xylar system, floated slightly above the floor. Its translucent body shimmered in blues and greens. "Welcome, humans," it said, voice echoing through the hall. "We are glad you agreed to come. Your input is always interesting." Daniel inclined his head slightly. Clara mirrored the gesture. They said nothing. Zorath's antennae twitched. "Very well. Let us begin. The matter today is urgent. The Council has noticed increased tensions in the outer sectors, conflicts that could escalate into full-scale war. We seek your advice, humans, as your history shows, unusual methods of resolution." From the other side of the hall, Trevok, a reptilian delegate, hissed in annoyance. "Unusual methods? They have no army capable of challenging a single planetary fleet. How can we take their advice seriously?" Daniel's gaze did not shift. He did not respond. Clara's eyes scanned the chamber, noting the small gestures of nervousness and aggression among the alien delegates. Lumari, a being with silver skin and 6 arms, clicked its fingers, creating a series of musical tones that sounded like laughter. "Perhaps we underestimate them. Do we truly understand the humans' capabilities?" A murmur spread through the room. The humans had long been known for unpredictable actions. Their technology was not always the most advanced, but they had a reputation for ingenuity that outmatched even the most sophisticated alien minds. The Council began presenting their plans and strategies. Charts appeared in mid-air, showing fleets, resources, and colonies. Voices overlapped as delegates argued over alliances, control, and power. Humans stood silently, not taking notes, not interrupting, not even leaning forward. They were observers. After an hour, a younger delegate from the Varnak species raised its voice. "Surely we cannot simply listen and wait. The humans will not speak unless prompted. What do they want? What is their interest in our affairs?" Daniel finally moved. He stepped forward and gestured lightly with his hand. Clara followed his lead. For the first time, humans had broken the absolute silence, but their words were still absent. They did not speak. The council stared uncertain. Zorath's glowing eyes narrowed. "Are you refusing to advise us?" Clara tilted her head slightly, and a small nod passed between the two humans. They turned and left the platform, walking out of the chamber with measured steps. No words, no warnings, just silence. The echo of their departure seemed to grow louder with every second. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. Trevok slammed a claw on the floor. "This is an insult! They come here and leave without saying a word!" Lumari's 6 arms waved, creating shimmering patterns in the air. "Do you not see, Trevok? This is precisely why humans are feared. They do not react as we expect. They act on principles unknown to us, and they are unshakable." Sophie Turner, a human-aligned diplomat from another system, shook her head. "They do not bow to pressure. They do not negotiate under threat. That is what makes them dangerous. Their silence is a choice, and it carries power." Meanwhile, Daniel and Clara walked down the wide corridors of Orion's spire, their boots clicking on the smooth floor. Daniel glanced at Clara. "They will panic," he said softly. "They already have," Clara replied. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "It will take time for them to realize they cannot control us." The humans reached the horizon, a ship small enough to seem harmless but designed to operate in ways the Council could never predict. Inside, Lucas Bennett, a young engineer with an easy smile, was monitoring communications. "You're back early," he said, noticing their return. Daniel gave a faint nod. "They tested us, and we passed." Clara leaned against a console. "They think humans act like everyone else. They think we need to negotiate. That is their mistake." In the council chamber, chaos was unfolding. Delegates argued, accusations flew, and the data streams of fleets and colonies were rerouted repeatedly by council staff trying to manage the fallout of the human silence. No one could decide what to do next. Sophie Turner's voice cut through the noise. "We cannot threaten them. We cannot bribe them. They do not respond to our usual methods. They simply walk away." Trevik's hiss grew louder. "Then we will act. We will send fleets. We will show them—" "Do not," Lumari interrupted. Its voice was calm but firm. "Do you think any fleet can reach them before they are already miles away? You do not understand humans. You underestimate them, as every species does. And every time we do, it costs us." Far away from the council chamber, humans were already observing several systems. Small, unremarkable probes moved silently among asteroids and planets, gathering information. These probes were not just for surveillance. They could subtly influence systems, shift energy flows, and stabilize conflicts before anyone noticed. Clara watched a display. "Look at Sector 12. They are about to declare war over a resource dispute. If we do nothing, thousands will die." Daniel nodded. "Then we do something, quietly, without anyone knowing." Their actions were deliberate, precise, and effective. Supplies were rerouted to prevent starvation. Communications networks were adjusted to prevent misunderstandings. Entire conflicts that might have escalated into war were ended before they began. All without firing a single shot or drawing attention. Back at the council, the alien delegates were growing more agitated. They could not understand how the humans operated. They tried to intercept communications, predict movements, and even threaten colonies under human protection, but every attempt failed. Daniel and Clara were always ahead, silent and invisible, yet shaping events. Sophie Turner approached Zorath. "They have done this before," she said quietly. "Every time humans are involved, the result is the same. They leave, we panic, and they still control the outcome. We cannot stop them because they do not play by our rules." Zorath's form flickered, a sign of thought or perhaps frustration. "We need to send a message. We cannot allow this to continue unchecked. But what can we do against beings who do not respond?" Meanwhile, on Horizon, Lucas and several other humans worked on technical adjustments. "They are watching us, trying to understand," Lucas said, eyes on the screens. "But they are looking for patterns. Humans are not patterns." Daniel looked out the viewport, seeing stars drift by slowly. "Let them try. Let them understand that we do not react as they do. Our power is not in weapons alone, but in choices, in planning, in knowing when to act and when not to act." Clara stood beside him. "They will learn, slowly, painfully, and by the time they realize, it will already be too late to undo what we have done." The council chamber remained in disarray. Delegates shouted, argued, and tried to find ways to counter human silent influence. Yet every measure they took seemed to be anticipated and countered before it even started. In a distant corner of the galaxy, humans moved silently. They stabilized colonies, prevented wars, and ensured that critical supplies reached the people who needed them most. No one claimed credit. No one noticed. The humans were ghosts, invisible but unmistakable in effect. Daniel smiled faintly. The galaxy is so sure of itself. It believes control lies in fleets and laws. But power is not in domination. It is in understanding, in patience, in quiet action. Clara nodded. And in walking away when others expect compliance. That is what they cannot comprehend. That is why they fear us. Back at Orion's spire, Zorath called an emergency session. Delegates argued endlessly about how to respond, but no agreement was reached. Trevok raged, Lumari tried to reason, and Sophie Turner simply shook her head. Humans do not answer to us. We have already lost control without even realizing it. As the council debated, the humans were already several systems away. They had left no trace of their presence, no signal, no demand. And yet everywhere they went, situations improved. Conflicts were averted, lives were saved, and resources were balanced. The council, in contrast, was descending into chaos, unable to manage what they could not see or understand. Daniel and Clara stood on the deck of Horizon, looking at the galaxy ahead. "This is only the beginning," Daniel said. Clara smiled faintly. "And they will pay for every mistake, every underestimation, every time they thought humans could be controlled. Without a word, we walk away, and the council will learn why." The stars stretched endlessly before them, and the humans moved forward, silent, unstoppable, and unseen. The horizon moved through the dark stretch of space like a quiet shadow. No sensors picked up its passage, no fleet detected its slow glide. Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, hands resting lightly on the railing. Clara Mitchell was beside him, scanning data that flowed across the consoles in soft blue light. Neither spoke, but both were aware of everything around them. "Sector 19 shows trouble," Clara said finally. Her voice was calm, but Daniel could hear the concern beneath it. "The mining colony there is running low on water and food. If the council does not intervene soon, people will start to riot." Daniel nodded. "Then we intervene. Quietly. We do not need to announce ourselves. They should never see us coming." Lucas Bennett, the young engineer, smiled as he worked at the console. "I've prepared a few drones. Nothing big. Just small systems to redirect water flows and balance energy grids. Should be enough to stabilize things without anyone noticing." Daniel leaned closer. "Good. Make it happen. Remember, the goal is not to fight. The goal is to prevent chaos." Clara looked at him. "Do you think they will ever understand that humans act differently? That we do not need threats or promises to influence outcomes?" Daniel shook his head. "No. They will try over and over and fail every time. That is the advantage we have. Patience and planning." Meanwhile, back at Orion's spire, the council was in turmoil. Every member species was struggling to understand the humans' behavior. No one could predict their next move, and no one dared challenge them directly. The council had tried to pressure human-aligned sectors into obedience, but messages were ignored. Fleets were rerouted without explanation, and critical resources shifted in ways no one could trace. Sophie Turner spoke quietly to Zorath. "They are acting in ways we cannot follow. They think far ahead. They stabilize problems before we even know they exist. Every action we take to control them is already anticipated." Zorath's form shimmered. "It is frustrating. They are not arrogant. They are not reckless. They do not seek our approval, and yet they shape the galaxy without firing a single shot. How can such small beings hold so much power?" Trevok hissed in response. "They are dangerous because they are unpredictable. They do not respond to fear, to logic, to threats. How do we stop what we cannot control?" The council fell silent for a moment, realizing that every plan they had relied on human cooperation. Without it, entire sectors were at risk. Far away, the humans worked quietly. Drones guided water to dry regions, energy grids were balanced to prevent blackouts, and minor conflicts between neighboring colonies were calmed before anyone noticed. Every action was subtle, precise, and effective. Clara moved from console to console, checking progress. Sector 23 is now stable. No one knows we were here. By the time anyone notices, everything will be in order. Daniel smiled faintly. That is the point. Power is not about being seen. It is about results, and humans get results. Lucas leaned back. It is strange. I feel like we are playing chess on a board no one else can see, and everyone else is arguing over pieces that do not even exist yet. Daniel chuckled softly. Exactly. They cannot see the whole board. That is why they fail. That is why they fear us. In the council, debates grew louder. Delegates argued over how to respond to the humans' absence. Some suggested fleets be sent to human territories. Others proposed economic sanctions, and a few even whispered of assassination or sabotage. Every plan, however, was delayed because no one knew where the humans were or what they were capable of. Lumari's 6 arms moved with agitation. We cannot attack what we do not understand. Every attempt to interfere is already countered before it begins. The humans have already learned our weaknesses. Sophie Turner sighed. And that is why they are feared. They do not need armies. They do not need fleets. They need foresight, patience, and action. That is their weapon. On the horizon, Daniel and Clara prepared for another task. Sector 28, Clara said, pointing at the map. They are on the brink of a civil uprising. Supplies are being stolen. Security forces are stretched too thin to manage it. Daniel nodded. Then we act. Lucas, get the stabilization drones ready. We do this quietly, without anyone seeing. No one should know humans were involved until it is too late to undo the work. The drones were deployed in silence. Small, almost invisible machines moved across cities, redistributing food, repairing water systems, and coordinating communications. Minor disputes were calmed with subtle manipulations of data and messages. No one realized a foreign hand had intervened, but life in the colony improved within hours. Clara observed the progress. By the time they understand, it will already be over, and the council will not be able to claim credit. They will have lost control without even realizing it. Daniel leaned on the railing, looking out at the stars. That is the human way. We do not seek recognition. We do not wait for thanks. We act because it is right, because it works, and because others cannot do what we do. Meanwhile, on Orion's spire, Zorath called an urgent session. We must decide. We cannot allow humans to continue unchecked. They influence our systems without our consent. They destabilize our plans. Trevok hissed. Then we attack. Send fleets to intercept them. Show them we are not powerless. Lumari shook its head. Do you not understand? They will not be where you think. By the time your fleets arrive, they will have already solved the problem and moved on. They are always ahead. Sophie Turner spoke quietly. We are trying to fight shadows. They are already in places we cannot reach. They act without announcement, without warning. Every failure we experience is because we try to see and control what cannot be controlled. On Horizon, humans continued their quiet work. They traveled through sectors, not as conquerors or invaders, but as guides and protectors. They stabilized colonies, prevented conflicts, and ensured that critical resources were used wisely. Every intervention was small, almost invisible, yet the effects were profound. Lucas leaned back from the console. Sometimes I wonder if anyone will ever understand what we are doing. They will see the results, but never the hands that shaped them. Daniel smiled. That is fine. We do not need understanding. We only need action. The Council believes they control the galaxy because they have fleets and laws. They do not see the real power lies in knowledge, planning, and quiet influence. Clara moved to the viewport, looking at a distant planet. They think we need to negotiate. They think we need to speak. That is their mistake. Humans do not act like others. We do not respond to pressure. We respond to reason, foresight, and necessity. Lucas glanced at her. It feels like we are ghosts, but ghosts that make a real difference. Daniel nodded. Exactly. Ghosts that leave results behind. The Council will learn, slowly, that absence does not mean weakness. It means control in a way they cannot measure or understand. Back on Orion's Spire, delegates continued their frantic discussions. Every proposal to counter humans failed before it was enacted. Fleets were rerouted, orders misinterpreted, and resources depleted unnecessarily. The Council was unprepared for a force that did not act openly, a force that acted in silence and patience. Sophie Turner whispered to Zorath, "The humans are teaching us a lesson, a harsh one. They do not need weapons. They do not need fleets. They need wisdom, patience, and courage. And that is something we cannot match." In the distance, Horizon continued its journey through space. Daniel, Clara, and Lucas worked quietly, adjusting systems, redirecting resources, and monitoring situations across several sectors. Every action was calculated, precise, and effective. Clara smiled faintly. It is strange. They think control comes from visibility, from dominance, from fear. We show them control comes from action and foresight. Daniel's voice was soft. And that is why humans are feared. Not because of strength, but because of understanding. Not because of weapons, but because of choices. We do not speak, we do not threaten, we do not show power, and yet we hold it in every move we make. The Horizon moved on, silent and unseen. Human influence stretched across the galaxy without announcement. Colonies stabilized, conflicts ended, and systems began to function more efficiently, all without recognition, all without confrontation, all without a word. Daniel looked at Clara and Lucas. This is the human way. We act quietly, decisively, and wisely. The Council will realize soon enough that silence is not weakness. It is power. Clara nodded. And when they do, it will already be too late. The stars moved past the horizon, endless and quiet. Humans moved with them, shaping the galaxy without presence, without recognition, without warning. The Council would scramble, make mistakes, and panic. And through it all, the humans would continue to act, unseen and unstoppable, leaving lessons in their wake that no alien could fully comprehend. Daniel looked ahead. We walk away without a word, and they will pay for every mistake, every underestimation. This is only the beginning. Clara smiled faintly. And the galaxy will learn in time why humans are unlike any other species. Silent, patient, and always one step ahead. Lucas leaned back, watching the displays. I think they will remember us forever, even if they do not know why. Daniel's voice was calm, almost gentle. They will remember, and the consequences of underestimating humanity will be theirs to bear. And with that, the horizon moved forward, a quiet shadow in the galaxy, carrying humans whose influence would be felt everywhere, even where they were never seen. The horizon moved quietly through a cluster of small stars, its hull reflecting faint light from distant suns. Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the displays with steady eyes. Clara Mitchell was beside him, moving from console to console, her fingers gliding over the controls with ease. Lucas Bennett adjusted the systems, monitoring every minor fluctuation in the sectors ahead. They were a small team, but their influence stretched across hundreds of worlds. Sector 34, Clara said, pointing to a holographic map. The Council sent reinforcements there, but they are late. The colony is on the edge of rebellion. They will turn violent if the Council's forces arrive unprepared. Daniel nodded. Then we intervene. Quietly. We prevent unnecessary bloodshed. No one should notice until it is done. Lucas smiled. I have a few drones ready for that. Small ones. They can redistribute resources, calm communications, and guide security forces without anyone seeing. Clara leaned closer to Daniel. Do you think they will ever understand us? That we do not act like them? That we do not respond to pressure or threats? Daniel shook his head. No. That is the advantage. They think power comes from fleets and commands. We show them power comes from foresight, patience, and action. On Orion's spire, the Council was in chaos. Delegates argued endlessly. Trevik hissed, pacing back and forth, claws scraping against the floor. We cannot allow them to manipulate the galaxy from the shadows. We must act. Lumari's 6 arms moved in precise patterns, almost as if it were counting invisible steps. You still do not understand. They do not act in ways we expect. Every time we prepare, they have already planned 3 steps ahead. We cannot predict them, and that is why we fail. Zorath floated silently, eyes glowing. We need a plan. We cannot allow humans to continue without response, but every attempt we make has already failed before it begins. Sophie Turner shook her head. They are not our enemies, yet we feel powerless. They act without threat, without demand. And the result is always control without exposure. That is their power. Back on the horizon, the humans were preparing their quiet intervention in Sector 34. Drones were deployed silently, moving like shadows through the colony. Water systems were redirected, food stores balanced, and energy grids adjusted. Communications were subtly guided to prevent misunderstandings. Security forces received instructions that seemed to come from local leaders rather than the humans. Daniel observed the progress. By the time the Council arrives, this colony will be stable, and they will not know who helped them. They will believe they are in control, but they are not. Clara nodded. It is always better this way. Intervention without recognition, influence without presence. That is why they fear us. Lucas glanced at the displays. It is strange to work this way. We are changing lives, preventing wars, yet no one knows we exist. Daniel's expression was calm. That is the point. Power is not in being seen. Power is in results. Humans deliver results. Meanwhile, at Orion's Spire, the Council attempted to adjust fleets and resources. Every move was anticipated. Messages were intercepted and rerouted in ways that seemed impossible. Delegates began to understand that humans were already acting in the sectors they thought they controlled. Trevok hissed angrily. Then we must follow them. We cannot let them dictate outcomes without our involvement. Lumari's arms waved in precise patterns. You will follow shadows. They will not be where you expect. They will always be one step ahead. That is why they are feared. Sophie Turner whispered, Every action we take is predicted. Every plan we make is already anticipated. They do not react like us. They act differently, and that is the advantage they have. In Sector 34, the colony began to stabilize. Small riots were diffused, supplies reached those in need, and the population began to calm. No one saw the drones. No one heard the humans. And yet, the difference was immediate and profound. Clara observed the data. It works every time. They cannot see the hand that guides them, but the result is always peace, stability, and order. Daniel smiled faintly. Humans do not need recognition. We act because it is right, because it works, because no one else can do it this way. That is our strength. Far from the colony, the horizon moved toward Sector 36. Daniel, Clara, and Lucas planned the next intervention. "This sector is in worse shape," Clara said. "They are fighting over mining rights. Violence will spread if we do not step in." Daniel nodded. "Then we act, quietly, efficiently, without announcement. We prevent conflict before it escalates. That is the human way." Lucas prepared the drones. "Ready when you are. No one will see them, no one will know." "Yet we will control the outcome completely," Clara smiled. "It is strange to be this powerful and invisible at the same time." Daniel shook his head. "It is not power in the way others see it. It is power in results, in influence without visibility, in action without demand. That is what terrifies the Council." At Orion Spire, debates grew more heated. Delegates argued endlessly about how to respond to the humans' absence. Some wanted fleets to pursue them, others wanted economic sanctions, and a few even suggested sabotage. Every plan was ineffective. The humans were already moving ahead, quiet and unseen, influencing every outcome before anyone could intervene. Zorath's eyes glowed with frustration. "We cannot attack them. We do not know their location. We cannot predict their moves. They act without threat, without announcement. And yet they control outcomes." Sophie Turner whispered, "That is why they are feared. Not because of weapons, not because of fleets, but because they act differently. They see what we cannot, plan what we cannot, and act without needing our approval." Meanwhile, on the horizon, the humans continued their quiet work. They moved through sectors, preventing wars, stabilizing colonies, and ensuring that resources were used wisely. Every intervention was subtle, precise, and effective. Clara leaned over a console. "Sector 36 is now stabilized. No one knows we were here. The Council will arrive and assume they are in control. They will not realize until it is too late that we have already shaped the outcome." Daniel nodded. "That is always the goal. Influence without recognition, action without presence. That is the human advantage." Lucas smiled faintly. "It feels like we are invisible guardians. People live better lives because of us, and they never even see us." Daniel looked out the viewport at the stars. "That is power. Not visibility, not dominance, but results. Humans do not need approval. We do not need acknowledgement. We act because it is necessary." Clara's eyes scanned the data. "And every time we act this way, the Council will struggle to understand. They will make mistakes. They will panic. They will learn the consequences of underestimating humans." Far away at Orion Spire, Zorath called another emergency session. Delegates argued endlessly. Every strategy to control humans failed before it was enacted. Fleets were misdirected, orders misinterpreted, and resources wasted. The Council was unprepared for a species that acted silently, patiently, and efficiently. Sophie Turner shook her head. "We are fighting shadows. They are always one step ahead. Every failure we experience is because we try to control what cannot be controlled. Humans do not react to pressure. They act in ways we cannot predict." Back on Horizon, Daniel and Clara prepared for Sector 38. Lucas adjusted the drones, ensuring they would move without detection, stabilize resources, and guide communications subtly. Daniel looked at Clara. "This is the human way. We act quietly, decisively, and wisely. Every action has purpose. Every move is precise. The Council will panic because they cannot understand what we are doing." Clara nodded. "By the time they realize, it will already be too late. The consequences of underestimating humans will be theirs alone." Lucas glanced at the holographic map. Another sector stabilized, another crisis avoided, and no one knows we exist. Daniel smiled faintly. "That is always the point. Humans do not seek recognition. We seek results, and results are more powerful than fleets, weapons, or threats. That is why they fear us." As Horizon moved on, silent and unseen, Humans acted across the galaxy. Every sector they touched improved. Conflicts ended, resources were balanced, and populations stabilized. All without confrontation, without announcement, and without a word. Daniel looked at Clara and Lucas. This is only the beginning. The Council will make mistakes. They will panic, and they will learn, slowly and painfully, the cost of underestimating humans. Clara smiled. And when they do, it will already be too late. Lucas nodded. We are ghosts, moving quietly, shaping the galaxy without presence. Invisible, but unstoppable. Daniel's voice was calm. They will remember us, even if they do not know why. Every failure, every mistake, every consequence will trace back to our influence. Humans are different. They act, they plan, and they move quietly. That is our power. The horizon drifted into the stars, leaving sectors stable, crises averted, and the Council scrambling in confusion. Humans walked away, as they always did, without a word, and the galaxy began to learn, in ways it could not yet understand, why humans could not be ignored, controlled, or predicted. The horizon moved silently through a dense field of asteroids, its hull reflecting the faint glow of nearby stars. Daniel Hayes stood at the bridge, looking at the holographic map that showed several unstable colonies. Clara Mitchell was beside him, scanning data that constantly updated with new crises. Lucas Bennett was adjusting the drones, preparing them for deployment across multiple sectors. Sector 42 is in chaos, Clara said. The Council sent troops to stop the fighting, but they are uncoordinated. If we do not act, hundreds will die. Daniel nodded. Then we act, quietly. We stabilize the sector before anyone notices our presence. No one should know we were here. Lucas smiled. I have already set the drones. They will move through the colony, redistribute resources, repair damaged systems, and guide the leaders. No one will see them and no one will know who is helping. Clara looked at Daniel. They will never understand us. They cannot. Humans do not act like other species. We do not respond to pressure or fear. We do what is necessary, quietly and efficiently. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. And that is what makes us dangerous. The Council thinks control comes from fleets, armies, and laws. We show them control comes from knowledge, foresight, and action. Far away, on Orion's spire, the Council was in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, trying to find a way to respond to the humans' absence. Fleets were rerouted, messages were sent to colonies, and sanctions were prepared. But every plan failed before it could take effect. Humans had already anticipated the problems and were solving them quietly. Trevok hissed, pacing angrily. We cannot let this continue. Humans act without threat, without announcement, and yet they control outcomes. We must do something. Lumari's 6 arms moved in precise patterns. You cannot control what you cannot see. Every action you take has already been countered. Humans do not act like us. That is their power. Sophie Turner shook her head. They are not reckless. They are not violent for the sake of it. They act wisely, and that is why the Council is powerless. They prevent conflict without anyone noticing. That is influence the Council cannot measure or counter. Back on the horizon, the humans deployed their drones in Sector 42. The drones moved through the colony like invisible helpers, repairing damaged power grids, redistributing food and water, and calming disputes before they could escalate. Security forces received guidance that seemed to come from local leaders, though in reality it came from the humans' careful planning. Daniel watched the progress. By the time the Council reaches this sector, it will be stable. They will think they are in control, but we have already shaped the outcome. Clara nodded. That is always the point. Intervention without recognition. Influence without presence. That is why the Council fears humans. Lucas leaned back, watching the holographic displays. It is strange. We prevent wars, stabilize systems, save lives, and no one knows we exist. Daniel smiled faintly. That is the human way. Power is not in being seen. Power is in results. Humans get results. Meanwhile, at Orion's Spire, Zorath called an emergency session. Delegates argued endlessly, trying to find a way to counter the humans' influence. Some suggested sending fleets to intercept the horizon, others proposed economic blockades, and a few even whispered of sabotage. Every plan was ineffective. Humans were already several steps ahead, stabilizing the very systems the Council believed they controlled. Trevak hissed angrily. "We cannot allow this. We must show them that we are not powerless." Lumari's arms waved in precise patterns. "Do you not see? Any attempt to interfere is already countered before it begins. The humans are always ahead. That is why they are feared." Sophie Turner whispered, "Every failure the Council experiences is because they try to control what cannot be controlled. Humans act in ways we cannot predict. They do not react like us. They act differently, and that is their advantage." Back on Horizon, Daniel, Clara, and Lucas prepared to stabilize Sector 44. "This sector is worse," Clara said, pointing to the map. "They are fighting over energy resources. Violence is spreading fast. If the Council intervenes, it will make everything worse." Daniel nodded. "Then we act. Quietly, efficiently, without announcement. We prevent conflict before it escalates. That is the human way." Lucas deployed the drones. They moved through cities and settlements, repairing energy grids, redirecting resources, and guiding local leaders. Small disputes were calmed with subtle manipulations of data and messages. No one realized humans were responsible, yet the difference was immediate and profound. Clara watched the progress. "By the time the Council arrives, the sector will be stable. They will not know who helped them. They will think they are in control, but we already have shaped the outcome." Daniel smiled faintly. "Humans do not need recognition. We act because it is necessary. That is our strength." Far away, the Council was growing desperate. Delegates argued over strategies to regain control of sectors, but every attempt failed. Fleets arrived too late, resources were mismanaged, and conflicts escalated in areas the humans had already stabilized. The Council was unprepared for a species that acted silently, patiently, and efficiently. Zorath's glowing eyes focused on Sophie Turner. "We cannot fight what we cannot see. We cannot negotiate with what does not respond. We cannot predict what they will do. And yet, they control outcomes across the galaxy." Sophie Turner whispered, "That is why humans are feared. Not because of strength or weapons, but because of their planning, patience, and quiet action. They act where we cannot, and the results always favor them." Back on Horizon, the humans continued their work. They moved to Sector 46, where a mining colony was in danger of collapsing under poor management and internal conflict. Drones were deployed to repair machinery, balance energy, and guide communications. Violence was prevented before it could erupt. Resources were redistributed to prevent shortages, and leaders were subtly guided to make better decisions. Daniel observed the progress. "Every sector we stabilize without recognition strengthens our influence. They cannot measure it, they cannot control it, and that is why humans are feared." Clara nodded. "They cannot see our methods, only the results." "That is enough." Lucas leaned back. "It is strange. We are everywhere, yet nowhere. People live better lives because of us, and they never even know it." Daniel looked out the viewport at the stars. "That is true power, influence without visibility, control without aggression. Humans act because it is necessary, and the results speak louder than fleets or threats." Clara moved to the console. "Sector 48 shows signs of unrest. The Council is sending reinforcements, but they will arrive too late. If we do not act, thousands will suffer." Daniel nodded. Then we act. Quietly, efficiently, and without announcement. That is the human way. Drones were deployed, moving through cities and settlements. Energy grids were repaired, food and water redistributed, and conflicts prevented. Security forces received guidance that seemed to come from local leaders. Every action was subtle, invisible, and effective. Clara watched the data. By the time the council arrives, the sector will be stable. They will not know we were here. They will believe they are in control, but they are not. Daniel smiled faintly. Humans do not need recognition. We act because it is necessary. We act because it works. That is what makes us dangerous. Far away, Orion's spire was in chaos. Delegates argued endlessly, unable to find a way to counter the humans' influence. Fleets were misdirected, orders miscommunicated, and resources wasted. Every plan failed before it could take effect. The council could not act quickly enough to match the humans' silent efficiency. Trevok hissed angrily. We cannot continue like this. Humans act without warning, without threat, without announcement. We must stop them. Lumari's 6 arms moved in precise patterns. You cannot stop what you cannot predict. Every action you take is already countered. That is the human's advantage. Sophie Turner whispered. They do not seek conflict. They do not act for recognition. They act because it is necessary, and that is why the council cannot control them. Back on Horizon, Daniel, Clara, and Lucas prepared to move to Sector 50. Another unstable system, another opportunity to prevent unnecessary suffering. Drones were ready, and human ingenuity guided every action. Energy grids, resources, and communications were adjusted, conflicts prevented, and lives saved. Daniel looked at Clara. Every intervention strengthens our influence. The council cannot measure it. They cannot predict it. That is why humans are feared. Clara nodded. By the time they realize, it will already be too late. We shape the outcomes and they can do nothing about it. Lucas smiled. We are ghosts. Invisible but unstoppable. Every sector we touch improves, every conflict prevented, every life saved. Daniel's voice was calm. They will remember the results, even if they never see the cause. Humans act, plan, and move quietly. That is our power. That is our way. The horizon moved through the stars, silent and unseen. Humans acted across the galaxy, stabilizing sectors, preventing conflicts, and guiding systems without recognition or announcement. The council scrambled, made mistakes, and panicked. And through it all, the humans continued, invisible and unstoppable, leaving lessons behind that no alien could fully comprehend. Daniel looked at Clara and Lucas. We walk away without a word, and they will pay for every mistake, every underestimation, every time they thought humans could be controlled. This is only the beginning. Clara smiled faintly. And the galaxy will learn slowly why humans are different, why they cannot be ignored, controlled, or predicted. Lucas leaned back. We are silent, but our impact is everywhere, invisible yet undeniable. Daniel's voice was calm, steady. Humans act because it is necessary. We do not seek recognition. We do not wait for thanks. We act, and the results follow. That is our power. That is our way. The horizon drifted into the stars, leaving stable sectors, prevented conflicts, and a council scrambling in confusion. Humans walked away, as they always did, without a word. And the galaxy began to learn in ways it could not yet understand why humans could not be underestimated. The horizon moved through deep space, silent and invisible. Stars passed by like scattered diamonds. Daniel Hayes stood at the bridge, eyes scanning the holographic map. Clara Mitchell was beside him, her focus sharp, fingers moving over consoles with quiet efficiency. Lucas Bennett adjusted drones and monitored signals, ready for the next intervention. Sector 52, Clara said. The Council has sent reinforcements there. They plan to seize control, but they are too late. Violence is spreading, and innocent lives are at risk. Daniel nodded. Then we act. Quietly. We stabilize the sector before anyone notices. No one should know we were here. Lucas smiled faintly. Drones are ready, small, invisible, and precise. They will repair systems, redistribute resources, guide communications, and prevent conflicts. No one will see them, yet they will make all the difference. Clara looked at Daniel. They will never understand us. Humans do not act like them. We do not respond to threats or demands. We do what is necessary quietly and efficiently. Daniel's expression was calm, and that is our advantage. The Council believes control comes from fleets and orders. We show them it comes from planning, foresight, and action. In the sector, drones moved silently. Energy grids were stabilized, food and water were balanced, and communication lines were redirected. Conflicts were diffused before anyone noticed. Leaders were subtly guided to make better choices, and security forces coordinated naturally, thinking it came from within. Daniel observed the results. By the time the Council arrives, this sector will be stable. They will think they are in control, but we already shaped the outcome. Clara nodded. Intervention without recognition, influence without presence, that is what terrifies the Council. They cannot predict or measure what we do. Lucas leaned back. It is strange. We prevent wars, save lives, stabilize systems, and no one even knows we exist. Daniel smiled. That is true power. Results, not recognition. Influence, not force. Humans deliver results. Far away, Orion's spire was in chaos. Delegates shouted, debated, and argued, trying to regain control. Fleets arrived too late. Resources were mismanaged. Conflicts escalated in areas the humans had already stabilized. The Council was helpless against a species that acted silently, patiently, and efficiently. Zorath floated above the chamber, eyes glowing. We cannot predict them. We cannot negotiate with them. We cannot fight them, and yet they shape the galaxy more than any fleet or law ever could. Sophie Turner whispered, Every mistake, every failure is ours, because we cannot see what they see. Humans act differently, and that is their power. They influence without being seen. Trevik hissed angrily. We must act. We cannot allow this. Lumari waved its 6 arms in precise patterns. You cannot control what you cannot measure. Every attempt to interfere is already countered. Humans are always ahead. That is why they are feared. Meanwhile, Horizon moved toward Sector 54. Another colony, another crisis. Violence was spreading over disputed territory. Resources were running low. Communication had broken down. Daniel nodded at Clara. Then we act, quietly, efficiently, and without announcement. That is the human way. Drones were deployed, moving silently through settlements, repairing systems, redistributing energy and supplies, and guiding local leaders. Conflicts were diffused before they could escalate. Security forces moved in perfect coordination, unaware of the humans guiding them. Clara watched the data. The sector will be stable before the Council even realizes there was a problem. They will believe they are in control, but we already shaped everything. Daniel smiled faintly. Humans do not need recognition. We act because it is necessary. We act because it works. That is our strength. Far away, on Orion's spire, the Council's panic increased. Delegates argued endlessly, unable to understand why their plans failed. Fleets were delayed, resources mismanaged, and conflicts worsened despite their efforts. Every move they made was anticipated and neutralized by humans acting silently across the galaxy. Sophie Turner whispered to Zorath, They are not reckless. They are not violent for pride or power. They act wisely, and that is why we are powerless. They prevent conflict without anyone knowing. That is influence the Council cannot see or stop. Back on Horizon, Daniel, Clara, and Lucas prepared for Sector 56. It was worse than any previous sector. A dispute over energy resources had escalated into open fighting. Thousands were at risk. Lucas deployed drones. They moved like invisible guardians, repairing grids, redistributing energy, and guiding communications. Leaders were subtly influenced to make wise choices. Conflicts were prevented before they could erupt. Daniel watched the progress. Every sector we stabilize strengthens our influence. The Council cannot measure it. They cannot predict it. That is why humans are feared. Clara nodded. By the time they understand, it will already be too late. We shape the outcomes and they can do nothing. Lucas smiled. We are ghosts, unseen but unstoppable. Every sector we touch improves, every conflict prevented, every life saved. Daniel's voice was calm. They will remember the results, even if they never see the cause. Humans act, plan, and move quietly. That is our power. That is our way. The Horizon moved silently to Sector 58, where a critical water supply had failed. Cities were in panic. Communication lines were down. Supplies were running out. Drones were deployed immediately, repairing systems, redirecting water, and calming the population. Leaders were guided to make efficient decisions. Conflict was prevented before it could begin. Daniel observed the results. By the time the Council arrives, this sector will be stable. They will think they are in control, but we already shaped everything. Clara nodded. That is always the point. Intervention without recognition. Influence without presence. That is why the Council fears humans. Lucas leaned back. We prevent disasters, save lives, and balance systems, and no one even knows we exist. It is strange, but powerful. Daniel looked out the viewport. That is the human way. Power is not in visibility or fleets. It is in results, in foresight, and in quiet action. Humans act because it is necessary, and that is why they fear us. Far away, Orion's spire was in total chaos. Delegates argued, screamed, and panicked. Fleets were misdirected. Orders were misunderstood. Conflicts escalated in areas the humans had already stabilized. The Council could not act fast enough to counter humans' silent efficiency. Zorath glowed with frustration. We cannot control what we cannot measure. We cannot predict what we cannot see. We cannot negotiate with what does not respond. And yet humans shape the galaxy more than any fleet or law ever could. Sophie Turner whispered. Every failure, every mistake, every disaster avoided is because we cannot see what they see. Humans act differently, and that is why they are feared. They influence without being seen, and that is our weakness. Meanwhile, on Horizon, Daniel, Clara, and Lucas prepared for Sector 60. The situation was dire. Rebels had taken control of key facilities. Supplies were low. Civilians were trapped. Daniel nodded at Clara. Then we act, quietly, efficiently, and without announcement. That is the human way. Drones were deployed. They moved through cities like invisible helpers, repairing power systems, redistributing supplies, and guiding communications. Leaders were subtly influenced to make better choices. Conflicts were diffused before they could escalate. Every action was precise, effective, and invisible. Clara watched the data. By the time the Council arrives, this sector will be stable. They will not know we were here. They will think they are in control, but we already shaped everything. Daniel smiled faintly. Humans do not need recognition. We act because it is necessary. We act because it works. That is our power. Lucas leaned back. We are ghosts, invisible yet unstoppable. Every sector we touch improves, every conflict prevented, every life saved. Daniel's voice was calm. The Council will realize too late that absence does not mean weakness. It means control in a way they cannot understand. Humans act, plan, and move quietly. That is our power. That is our way. The horizon moved through the stars, silent and unseen. Humans acted across the galaxy, stabilizing sectors, preventing conflicts, and guiding systems without recognition or announcement. The Council scrambled, made mistakes, and panicked. And through it all, humans continued, invisible and unstoppable, leaving lessons behind that no alien could fully comprehend. Daniel looked at Clara and Lucas. We walk away without a word, and the Council will pay for every mistake, every underestimation, every time they thought humans could be controlled. This is only the beginning. Clara smiled faintly. And the galaxy will learn, slowly, why humans are different, why they cannot be ignored, controlled, or predicted. Lucas nodded. We are silent, but our impact is everywhere, invisible, yet undeniable. Daniel's voice was calm, steady. Humans act because it is necessary. We do not seek recognition. We do not wait for thanks. We act and the results follow. That is our power. That is our way. The horizon drifted into the stars, leaving stable sectors, prevented conflicts, and a council scrambling in confusion. Humans walked away, as they always did, without a word, and the galaxy finally began to understand, in ways it could not yet fully see, why humans could never be underestimated.